Zoom. And you're absolutely right, Katerina, when you said that. Actually, probably I need to just to repeat one thing: is the name of our session, and then we go. So the name is GR Community after COVID-19 and in the period of Russian aggression, modern challenges. And this is what I was going to say, not so much about myself, but about the general situation probably, because the world is changing, and it's changing for all of us, and we didn't expect that it could be so dramatically changed. Yes, we're talking about professional issues today, but we're working just to make our life better normally, right? And lobbying and the government relations, it's part of the professional services. And as our life is changing now, obviously our practice is changing, and the challenges are new. Just mentioning about emerging markets, and Katerina mentioned Central Asia, in particular Azerbaijan, or countries of the ex-Soviet Union, I would call them. The practice of lobbying in these countries is not so well probably introduced or established, because legal system is a bit different. So it's easier to work in the United States because your legal system is so well done, and it's medium to rare, I would call it, in that part of the world, and probably in Africa it's very similar. So when we'll be talking about lobbyism in this part of the world, I would rather call it government relations. And to me, there is big difference between lobbying and government relations. But again, it's probably not so much about myself, but about my panel, and I would invite everybody just to share your ideas on these basically two issues: how world is different for you now, and what is going to be different for lobbying community or government relations specialists. And if you don't mind, I'll start in the alphabetical order. So that's why, Ariel, if you could share your view. Okay. So the name is GR Community after COVID-19 and in the period of Russian aggression, modern challenges. And this is what I was going to say, not so much about myself, but about the general situation probably, because the world is changing, and it's changing for all of us, and we didn't expect that it could be so dramatically changed. Yes, we're talking about professional issues today, but we're working just to make our life better normally, right? And lobbying and the government relations, it's part of the professional services. And as our life is changing now, obviously our practice is changing, and the challenges are new. Just mentioning about emerging markets, and Katerina mentioned Central Asia, in particular Azerbaijan, or countries of the ex-Soviet Union, I would call them. The practice of lobbying in these countries is not so well probably introduced or established, because legal system is a bit different. So it's easier to work in the United States because your legal system is so well done, and it's medium to rare, I would call it, in that part of the world, and probably in Africa it's very similar. So when we'll be talking about lobbyism in this part of the world, I would rather call it government relations. And to me, there is big difference between lobbying and government relations. But again, it's probably not so much about myself, but about my panel, and I would invite everybody just to share your ideas on these basically two issues: how world is different for you now, and what is going to be different for lobbying community or government relations specialists. And if you don't mind, I'll start in the alphabetical order. So that's why, Ariel, if you could share your view.
When I was preparing for this presentation, I thought what is changing, and the answer is almost everything is changing. This is a transformative world event, and it is a part of a process. It's not just Russia-Ukraine war. It is a part of an attempt by Russia and China to change the balance of power in the world so that the US and the West collectively, the EU and the US together, plus Japan, plus Australia, their domination will decline, and Russia and China will be the hegemons, together or separately. I think in that respect, a lot of our potential clients, companies, and individuals do not have a full grasp, as we saw, for example, with some ultra-high net worth individuals, commonly referred to as oligarchs, having their assets frozen, the yachts, the houses, their companies taking over. They did not realize where they are and how they're caught in that. I do believe that myself and the entities I'm affiliated with, the Atlantic Council, the International Tax and Investment Center, ITIC, the website is iticnet.org, iticnet.org. And my consulting companies, we are better prepared by grasping the geostrategic, geoeconomic, military, and basically economic, natural resources, problems and crises, multiple crises in energy, in raw materials, in strategic minerals, in food, in fertilizer. Everything is very, very shaky. And when everything is very shaky, people need help. They need services. So my experience, starting with being a senior consultant for a company called Burson Marsteller, a big government relations company, starting in the 90s, working with the World Bank, working with emerging markets in Russia, capital markets, education, legal reform, and then throughout my think tank career, being the head of Eurasia at the Heritage Foundation, and then starting an energy policy program at Heritage in 2001 and leading it till 2014, and then with the Atlantic Council, with ITIC, and being a consultant, I focus on two major areas that are absolutely critical in the current global crisis or multiple crises. One is the nonprofit world, the think tank world, and two is the media. So if you look me up on Google, yesterday I had a piece on Putin's strategic mistakes in Ukraine, and 2 days before, on Monday, I had a piece in The Hill, which is the US Congress-focused publication, on the Marshall Plan for Ukraine. You see how the thought leadership in particular issues, such as the assistance package to Ukraine, the future assistance package to Ukraine, or in energy transformation, for many, many years, for decades, the Energiewende in German, energy transformation, was the mantra in Europe. All of a sudden, Europe wakes up and says, what we really, really need to do now is to replace the Russian gas with something. So what are they going to replace it with? My suggestion would be, if you're so serious about CO2 emissions and global warming, you have to boost nuclear energy. The Green Party in Germany says, oh no, we're going to buy more coal. Well, how are you going to buy more coal if coal is the most polluting source of energy? but I'm sure the politicians know better. Just an example of a huge fight that will be going on for the next several years till Europe figures out, Europe and the US too. I mean, we have the Biden administration, which is very good on Ukraine. I just applaud it. But at the same time, it is of two minds on energy. It wants energy transformation along the European-German lines, but at the same time, Mr. Biden is going to Saudi Arabia after he said he will never talk to the Saudis to beg for more cheaper oil so that the Russians will not get this revenue stream to continue the war. So these are examples where think tanks and the media are playing a key role in educating our policymakers, decision makers, political elites, and broad public, and educating them about specific issues such as, let's say, building more nuclear reactors in Europe, or redirecting American liquefied natural gas for the European markets, or why we should not be as nasty as we were to our Arab Gulf friends. Just a couple of examples. In terms of our experience, we worked on issues in Central Asia, Ukraine, the Caucasus, a little bit on Africa, a little bit on Latin America, and as I said, Eurasia writ large, Eastern Europe, etc. And in terms of our networks, these are the networks in the media, in the think tank world primarily. We do not do lobbying, but we help clients to select the proper American lobbying firm that fits the client. It is very important.
Really, it is important to talk about future, I think, because you just mentioned about opportunities that for lobbying firm, and then either we're talking about emerging markets and finding new clients in emerging markets, or educating West about emerging markets. I think it's two different issues. So where we're concentrating our efforts, and obviously we can work in both places, but I think it is important to divide. Either your clients are here or your clients are there. And David, what do you think?
Well, thank you, and thank you very much for the invitation. I appreciate it. I was sort of a last-minute addition, but I don't feel like I was left out. I feel honored that somebody reached out to me at such short notice. The area that I've been very involved in is the promotion of public-private partnerships, which I think are critical when we talk about partnerships between the public and the private sector. These are arrangements, these are more formal ones, these are not philanthropic arrangements, but these are contractual arrangements between the public and the private sector to provide services, introduce innovation, also to provide alternative financing to projects which might never happen because governments don't have the resources, and then cumulatively, leveraging the resources of both the public and the private sector. And this does require a very, very strong debate between the public and the private sector. In many countries, the public sector is used to just issuing procurements. It doesn't consult with the private sector, doesn't even bother to find out if the private sector has the capability or the interest in participating in projects. And so the result of that is that many times large procurements for critically needed infrastructural services go unanswered because the private sector is not interested in them or they don't have the resources. In the beginning of the pandemic in 2020 in May, I reached out to a very extensive network that I have and asked them, what are the impacts of the pandemic on your public-private partnerships that you're involved in? I got responses from 70 countries, which was quite a good response, from PPP practitioners, both in the government and the private sector. And they said that, we are not really changing our focus on the types of projects that need to be done. The priorities are, and they listed, and I've got them here, energy, and by that being renewable energies, because there's a realization that we can't keep on relying on fossil fuels forever. Healthcare, which was pretty obvious because during the pandemic, the healthcare systems were falling apart all over the world. Even here in the United States, we had a catastrophe. And then transportation, but not the old type of transportation, more transportation that was focused on smart type projects, innovative projects. And then what happened was that over time this debate evolved. The United Nations Economic Commission for Europe has a PPP Center of Excellence in Geneva, and they have launched an initiative, and it's a very nice change. It's a paradigm shift. Instead of just doing public-private partnerships as procurement methods for large infrastructure and relationships between the government and the private sector, they've launched an initiative called People First PPPs. And what they're looking at is leveraging PPPs also as a development tool or a development mechanism. So what is the focus of this? It's helping countries to use public-private partnerships in partnership, and I want to stress this, with the private sector to help countries achieve their sustainable development goals. This is critical. It's also now with the European taxonomy and the Securities and Exchange Commission here in the United States beginning to emphasize ESG. This is also becoming a consideration. And so what we have is a new approach which is not just focusing on the old situations of value for money, that was a big focus of projects, but also value for people. And we need to be honest, when we're doing projects, we're actually doing it for people. We're not doing it just for the sake we can do it. And the other is value for the future, which ties in very closely to what we're talking about. And value for future being another term, future-proofing projects. So this is introducing considerable amounts of demands or requirements or understandings for sustainability and resilience. This has resonated very well with the international community. And so even United States-based organizations that are focused on international development, international aid, we know who they are. I'm sure you've all heard of the Million Challenge Corporation, USAID, Department of State, Department of Commerce, and they, in partnership with organizations such as the Global Infrastructure Hub, which is a G20 organization that was set up, and in the Global Center on Adaptation, which is another spin-off created in Europe, are looking at how can we leverage these partnerships, how can we engage with the private sector. So what is happening is it's pounding at the doors of the private sector and saying, we need you as partners, we need your insights. And this has, become really prevalent in emerging markets. I do a lot of work in the Middle East, and I've supported the governments of Oman, the United Arab Emirates, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the Islamic Republic of Egypt. And this language of people first, private sector engagement, ESGs is becoming more and more important. Just this week, in partnership with the World Bank, the government of Egypt has launched a whole new initiative for sustainable and green PPPs. So it's not just PPPs as they existed, so they're going to take their law, their procurement laws, their enabling environment, and they're going to introduce a green element to it. And you're seeing this also happening in certain states in the United States, and definitely with the current administration, they're very focused on sustainability, resilience. I think what we are doing is we're moving away from when we use the word green. It's not tree hugging anymore, but it's survivable or survivability strategies. Because if you just see what's happened in the western United States with running out of water, massive fires, which is happening in the Gulf states of the United States, with hurricanes that were 1,000-year events becoming every year events now, and that we have to look at these factors and consider them. And again, it is so important that the private sector is engaged. I have worked for the public and the private sector. When I worked for the public sector, I was not paid to be innovative, let's be honest. I was paid to do my job according to the manual, the guidelines, and the procedures and policies. The private sector is different because they are very competitive, and for them to survive, they have to engage strategies that will encourage sustainability, resilience, future-proofing. Another thing that is also important is that we have to introduce transparency and competitiveness in procurements. Because unless this is done, the best stay away and the worst get the contracts all the time. And this happens worldwide, in the United States and you name it, Europe, Africa, where I originally come from. I know I don't look typically African, but I'm a very proud African from South Africa. And so we are working, at finding ways to improve improve transparency, because then it gives you that value for money, that value for the future, that value for people that you're looking for, and transparency which ensures that the best are chosen. Companies that are embracing this are also pushing governments to set out their guidelines, their practices, so that there's a standard approach. And this ties down, and it's the last statement I make, is about the whole idea of unsolicited proposals. This is a red herring for many organizations. So in the situation, typically the government initiates a procurement, but what is happening now that many private sector institutions are going to governments and saying, we've got a great idea, we've got a great practice, a great policy, new technology, we would like to engage with you. And governments are trying to find ways to accept this, but making sure that there's still competition, because otherwise it becomes just a sort of how would you call it, just another one-sided event, and we don't want this to happen. So what I would just end off with saying is that there are great things happening. The pandemic is not a disaster. In actual fact, I think it's been a great generator of new innovative ideas. And then also, the war in the Ukraine has just made countries around the world very, very aware of how fragile their supply systems are, the sources are, the economies are. And with that in mind, I'll just make one little statement that I'm working very closely with the Ukrainian PPP unit in Kiev. We're working with the head of it. And through an organization that I work with, the World Association of PPP Units and Professional Practitioners, we have created a task group, and we've offered our services to the government of Ukraine to ensure that there are new ways of introducing and doing infrastructure projects and service projects better. We've heard in the United States, let's build back better. This should be also, let's build back better in the Ukraine as well. So what we're doing is identifying new priorities, project pipelines of viable projects that are commercially and economically viable, which will attract responsible ESG-focused investors to build a better world.
Felix, please.
Great. Thank you so much. Greetings from Ghana, a very formidable and democratic state, which has become the gateway to Africa and the destination as well. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to such a very important program. Lobbying, which is a specific component of every institution's communication strategy, is gradually becoming a multi-billion-dollar industry. And when I was checking, I realized that for the past 2 years now, the US alone spent close to $2.5 million on lobbying activities. And this chunk of expenditure is coming from businesses and corporate artists that are trying to influence decisions starting from international trade, we're talking about other policies, and then agreement. And one critical aspect of this is that political scientists recognize lobbying as one of the legitimate, uses in democracy, because it gives the citizens, and corporate institutions, including groups and labor unions, for their voices to be heard in the political arena. But things have changed because of COVID. And now that the influence of game has changed, the rules must also change so that it can reflect on this 21st century's, realities. COVID-19 pandemic has really highlighted how globalization and digitalization are reshaping our planet. So there is the need to revamp our lobbying or advocacy rule to be able to reflect on these particular activities. Now, the realities include rapid technological change, global competition for influence, and citizens who demand higher standards of integrity and inclusiveness in policy making. Because if you really check things, you realize that in so many countries, you realize that the citizens are even losing trust in our institutions. So COVID-19 has really, really tested our government to see how best they can respond to those kind of issues, which has been the biggest after the Second World War. And right now we have about $15 trillion that has really cost the economy because of the COVID-19. And the recovery plan is going to be so great and is going to put a lot of spotlight on lobbyists. And for us to make this industry very effective, we need relationship, we need effective budget, we need effective regulations and database policies. I checked and I realized that the first set of global lobbying guideline was created in 2010 following the 2008-2009 financial crisis. A decade on, many countries were able to at least put things in place. But others, they are not making so much progress in that concerning the lobbying risk. And you realize that where there are even rules, we have some avenues for abuse. And so there is the need that at this particular time, tougher regulations to be able to control the industry. And if you look at other parts of the world, what is emerging now is what we call citizen lobbying. When this thing started back in the media time, everybody said, look, these guys don't mind them. I mean, people just take their mobile phones and then put things out there. But now it has catch up. And it's the same thing that we are experiencing now in this 21st century, where anybody with smart devices could just go for some review, put it out there, just to lobby, a policy as to whether it is good or not. Sometimes these are falsified informations. And therefore, there is the need for us to be able to make sure that first, technology and digitization has transformed influence from handshake to hashtag. And we got to utilize all those things as citizen lobbying has also become the order of the day. There must also be the need for influencers themselves who are evolving to the extent that they need to, most of the time, concentrate on a larger market. Now we have some few players that they have been concentrating on, where the NGOs, the foundations, the think tanks, people don't really, include their activities in whatever normally that happen. And therefore, I want to say that transparency is key in whatever lobbying activities or public, affairs activities that goes on in every sectors of the economy, and so that we can have a broader stakeholder, engagement to ensure that all the things that are happening globally, there are so many things that are happening, but we could be able to venture into it and make sure that lobbying or GR activities become so legitimate for others.
All right, Felix.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, I like very much from hashtag to handshake, or actually from handshake to hashtag. I think, but it's great. We'll try to answer questions if we have them from internet community, as we're talking about hashtags now. So please prepare them if you have them. And in the meantime, I'm very happy to invite Michael Sigler to speak on the issues. And this is your talking sticks.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the organizers to having me here, and also opportunity to actually to speak and to address you. I'm coming from Slovenia, which is the member state of the European Union. Actually, that's also the ex-Yugoslavian state from the past. I just wish to highlight that you will understand where we are when we stand in all this, what's going on with also regarding Russia-Ukraine aggression. So, and as the time, at all those times, the Yugoslavia was non-aligned, actually having non-aligned movement, and in the way Yugoslavia didn't wish to be the part of the West or the East, but nevertheless, right, it was a dictatorship regime. So after the independence, we got 6 new states, 7, and now Slovenia was then, in 1991, we fought for independence as well, so there was a war. And actually, Slovenian decided with a 90% of referendum that we are independent state and that we wish to be the part of the West. And at the time when we stated that, it was very difficult, as it is difficult for Ukraine today, actually lobby all those, how to say, governments all around the world, and actually to get the support and to be a Western independent state. Our, how to say, attempts, our mission as a country was that we actually became a part of NATO and a part of the European Union. And we wish that the same thing will be happening in future for Ukraine as well. But nevertheless, as Slovenia was actually also on the part being on the west, on the east, was in the past also chosen that Bush and Putin met actually in our small country, because we were always as a small country, 24,000 square kilometers, 2 million people. We were very diplomat, also to the west, to the east. So we know, how to say, this area around. Nevertheless, you have to know that we also fought, right? Because we had a war. There was a Bosnia, which was a very big conflict for us, very near to us, 400 kilometers. Or, for example, now Ukraine is 1,500 kilometers. So all the time, how to say, we are dealing with some turbulences there. And actually, we wish to have, as European Union was peace process, that there will be peace and good economy and good development there. So, when we speak regarding the lobbying opportunities and regarding, first we had COVID, and afterwards we have this Russian aggression. And the first, Mr. Early Cohen, right, just said about how Europe is with energy and if we know our way forward or so. Let me answer that we actually Slovenia held the presidency of the EU just half a year ago. And one of the things that Europe had before the Russian aggression was actually Fit for 55. Because we know that the climate change has a big impact in the world. And Europe is very decided that we will decarbonize and that we will lower the carbon emissions for 55%. Of course, that means big commitments everywhere, within taxation, within the, how to say, economical development, the way that there will be much more green transition technologies and everything regarding this. And so, when it happened that Russia now actually, how to say, started the war, just has speed that up, that it will be much more faster. If you, I don't know if you followed, there just passed that there will be electric cars to the year 2035 they wish to have, but the problem is that here is a big potential for all, I'd say, overseas US and so, because we are not electrified, if there is a right expression, or we are ready for this, right? Because it will be a big consumption of electricity. So what it means? It means that there should be a lot of new technologies. For example, for hydrogen, which it has to come in, solar, of course, because now everything, also the construction permits, whenever you will build something in Europe, you'll have to build with a solar roof. And there will be like 300 billion euros now for this, that we will build all the roofs, all how to say, across Europe. Of course, we cannot fool ourselves that we were all working, all the states were for national, for Nord Stream 2 project, because, you know, everyone separately deal with Russia and wish to have supply for the gas for another 100 years. But of course it was mistaken, because no one didn't know that there will be Russia aggression. And now, because we are without the gas and war is here, and the Germany, which will have, how to say, the most bad impact of this, we will all know what's coming in autumn in Germany. It means that there will be a lower production. It means there will be inflation. Regarding these attempts that there will be, how to say, importing even the coal, how to say, from Poland. Poland has some, in EU, some specific agreement that they have a clean, how to say, mining and clean thermal power plant, but we cannot say that, right? So, and of course, there is now, for this European opportunity in the energy, just to say, Also, LNG is now a big, how to say, opportunity. So for US, but LNG not for very high prices that, you know, the tankers come with LNG to the Mediterranean or elsewhere, and then suddenly someone from Hong Kong will call this tanker and say, I give you a higher price, and that it will go. This is our problem. That's why we wish to have all secure, how to say, pipelines out from Russia, right? It's always the same price. So if there will be something with the LNG that the prices will be right for the EU, it would be perfect, right? So for hydrogen investments, because a lot of refineries and so are now also adjusting to this market, hydrogen is important. It will be for transport, it will be for aircrafts, it will be for buses, for public transportation. And it is actually also the solution not just for electrifying the European Union. If you ask the BMW, who said, we have to be more ambitious that there will be more electric cars. What does it mean? It means that they will simply, in Northern Africa, they wish to put solar plant and then, how to say, import all the energy out from the Northern Africa. So there are a lot of studies how they wish to do it. So I say, energy, it is a big opportunity because it's opportunity for Germany, for our countries, and so our country, Slovenia, it was 70 to 80% dependent on Russian gas, and now, how to say, we traded recession because we believe it will be coming, right? It will be affecting also increases of prices, supply chain, everything, and Europe, in this respect, is a victim, right? And of course, that is opportunity that we stand together, we lobby for the things that we grow and we have same energy solutions. COVID. During the COVID times, also as a presidency of Slovenia to the EU, we actually have a project which is called e-health. We know that people couldn't, how to say, travel, couldn't get good medical service at the hospitals. In some countries you had special COVID hospitals, in some you had just the departments or so. So for e-digitalization and for, how to say, that you do a personal, how to say, meeting, the MD or general practitioner or the family doctor more with their patients regarding their symptoms, and this telemedicine is very important. So there are a lot of governments are still, how to say, in the process because they have to re-establish their health care system, and digitalization is a big, big issue, and e-health in the EU. And with the good, how to say, IT solutions is just waiting that someone will come invest, especially on our side where we are from the central and eastern, how to say, countries. So that's what we see as well. And then, of course, when we have the outside of the EU, those are the countries which are surrounding us, like Bosnia, also Serbia, and those who are they are not supporting the sanctions toward Russia, and they should. Right, but they are not a part of EU, right? They don't, right? And the thing is that actually to speak with them as well, to get them on Western dialogue, to lobby that, and as well how they could gain out from the Western as well, Western investments and all those things.